Hi all, it's been a long time since I've been on here to talk about books. And that's mostly because lately I have been very uninspired by the books I've been reading. That doesn't mean they've all been bad, I just don't have a lot to say about them. So I thought, I want to make a video today, what should I talk about? And I said, I never did like a full stats wrap up of my 2024 reading. Is it way too late? Yeah, it's almost the end of February. But there are no rules. I make the rules and I didn't do this and I want to do it, so I'm gonna do it today. Let's get started. 2024 books in review. First, reading by age range. You can see that most of them were adult reads. It used to be a little bit more young adult and middle grade when I was a teacher, but I don't really have that motivation anymore. I still will never get away. There will always be some of these reads every year, but most of them were adult. Next, reading by format. I compared this from 2023 to 2024, and in 2023 I read a lot of hardcovers, and I noticed that, and I thought, I don't even like reading hardcovers. I generally much prefer a paperback, and so I made an effort to try to find the paperback versions in the library or buy paperback versions, and you can see that the light blue, there are a lot more of those this year, and a little bit more audiobook and ebooks too, because I was reading on the go a lot, and that was a little easier. Books by release. You can see this lightest color is my new releases, and I think I read a little bit more of those than I normally do, even though that's still the smallest percentage. I was trying to read what was current this year, and I feel like I did that pretty well. In terms of genre, these are probably too small for you to read, but definitely fantasy came up the most in terms of genre, and then romance, and then contemporary and historical, historical and then contemporary, it looks like. So this is pretty normal. This is basically what happens every single year, but it's consistent and I like that. This one is a ratings breakdown. So you can see the little tiny part of the yellow is the ones that I gave 5 stars to. And you can see how picky I am about 5 stars. But I think I was less picky this year because there's a little bit more of those. And a little bit more of the love section instead of just the like section. So I think I did better this year in my picks because I loved more of them. This is the number of books I read per month. It kept going up and up. I started kind of low in January of last year, which is surprising because I started pretty good this 2025 January, but it just kept getting better and better. I read a lot in the summer, so this didn't surprise me. And then September was like my most insane work month. And so I just was so exhausted I could not read, so I only read like a few books that month. So this is what it looks like for the whole year though. When I do data like this, I always have revelations like the hardback versus paperback thing. But this year I was the least proud of this next slide, and it's making me very much reconsider what I'm reading because this was my author diversity, and you can see that only about a quarter of the books I read were by BIPOC authors. And I thought it would be more than that, because if you'd asked me if I read diversely, I would say, yeah, I read very diversely, but turns out it's mostly white women. I mean, this doesn't necessarily surprise me. I feel like we're drawn to things that are more familiar to us, and white women's stories probably are more familiar to me, but I do feel like I get a lot out of diverse reads, and I definitely want to make more of a point to find diverse authors and diverse stories in 2025. Now we're going to go into some of my highlight reads based on genre. The most thing I read are romance. There's romance in most of the books I read, but these are the ones that kind of stood out in terms of just romance and nothing else. Ted Blind Dates and Heartless Hunter are both young adult books, but both super cute romances. Richard Blackbird surprised me the most of probably any book all year because it's about 2 serial killers. Why would I like that? But I enjoyed the hell out of it. Bride, I will read anything Ali Hazelwood does. I actually read a short story by her this past year as well. I almost added it to this top 5, but it's a short story, so I took it off, but she is my favorite. And then The Nanny surprised me too because it looked like a cutesy thing that I would just read and think it was good, but I love The Nanny. All right. Fantasy. I read a bunch of fantasy books like always, and they have amazing worlds. The first 2, Malice and Game of Thrones, are those traditional epic fantasies that had the best worlds. I loved them so much. I'm going to try to finish reading both of those series this year. I bought the entire Malice series recently, and oh, I'm so excited. I think Malice was better than Game of Thrones, but I know that's an unpopular opinion. Inkblood Sister Scribe is more of a contemporary fantasy in terms of it's in modern day, but The Mirror and Book Magic was something I'd never seen before and definitely deserves a shout out. And then these are romanticies, so more romance and fantasy kind of combined, but the characters in these are probably some of my favorite characters all year. Book of Azrael and The Crown of Oaths and Curses, both chef's kiss characters. I know that these are the ones that most people want me to recommend to them because most of my friends and family are not fantasy people, much to my chagrin. So here are the things that I read in contemporary. I love them too. I think Yagyasi's Transcendent Kingdom is something that I think about more than any other book I read last year. I absolutely adore that book. Everything about it just spoke to me on this intimate level that I feel it in my heart. Margot's Got Money Troubles, such good commentary on women in society. In terms of that, the last two are also kind of great commentary. Dolly Alderton's book is kind of an anti-love story, good material. It kind of talks about the man and woman's perspective, though, in a relationship, and I found that so interesting. And then After I Do is not really a love story at all, even though sometimes it's marketed that way. It is more of a like finding yourself kind of story, which I loved. And then the middle one, Greatest Lie of All by Jillian Cantor, is almost everything. It's historical, it's contemporary, it's mystery, it's romance, and it's fun. Historical, the bookend ones here are Kristen Hanna, and that's pretty basic. That should not surprise anyone. The Women was my favorite historical one this year by far. Although Four Treasures of the Sky comes in second, it is very sad though. So if you're going to go into Four Treasures of the Sky, know that you might cry because I cried my eyes out. So Alice Network is a pretty typical war historical fiction with two timelines. I've seen it done before, but I still was fully entertained. And Frozen River is about a midwife, also has a little bit of mystery. Felt really unique to me. Thrillers, I kind of have the basics. Alice Feeney and Ruth Ware are two of my favorites. These were the ones I read this year of them. This one's a techno thriller, so a little bit of sci-fi, AI. That one's fun. This one's more horror, but I had to include it because it's one of my favorite books of the year. And this one's a translated work, I'm Traveling Alone. It's a pretty typical crime thriller, but loved it. And then the last thing I was going to say is young adult. I know I didn't read as many of them this past year, but the ones I did read, these are some of the ones that stood out to me. Some great picks here. And then finally, just some other ones miscellaneous that I still think are noteworthy, even though they didn't make a top 5 of any of the categories I had listed. So this is what I read last year. Thank you for listening, and I hope that I have something more current that I'm reading and very soon that I can share with you.